But I think what I've been able to cultivate is this relentless, continuous of like, I want to grow, I want to grab, I want to change, I want to do this. I want to keep going after these interesting things because I have a different relationship with death than I think most people do. I think people need to really understand their relationship with death to have a much better relationship with life.
All right. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Look Up Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Weinstein. And as has become a tradition of late, I just want to start off by thanking you all for listening. Thank you so much for your time, for your attention, for your commitment to this community. It means a lot to me to know that you're out there and that these episodes are resonating with you. I continue to get great feedback from some of you about the show, and it just feels so good to know that the work that we're doing here is impactful. We're deep into the quarantine zone. It's April 12th, 2020, week 4 of quarantine during the COVID-19 crisis. This episode was recorded in February, but I believe that it's just incredible to me how some of the episodes I recorded right before this dramatic change in our lifestyles have such profound messages that are critical for this moment in time. This episode focuses heavily on facing our own mortality and finding stillness, understanding that life comes to us as it will, and we have to develop a love of fate. My guest today is Justin Rezvani. Justin is an accomplished individual. At the age of 24, he started a company called theAmplify, which grew into a profitable influencer marketing platform that had a daily reach of more than 500 million in 2013. His clients included Coty, Nestle, Taco Bell, Ford, and Unilever. And so in 2016, after building this behemoth in the marketing space, Justin sold it to You and Mr. Jones, a brand technology company founded by the former CEO of Havas, David Jones. And after selling his company, he was seemingly slightly pushed out, and he realized that he was extraordinarily out of shape physically. He was over 200 pounds. He was a self-professed alcoholic, and he made the decision that he had accomplished his goal on the business front, but that he had lost track of other areas of his life. And so he was going to set a new goal by refocusing his energy on his health. He was just about to turn 30 when he finished his first triathlon, which led him down the path of becoming a professional athlete in Ironman. And he completed it. He completed an Ironman. And directly after completing the Ironman, Justin realized and discovered that he had a brain tumor and he would need brain surgery to heal it. He spent time in the hospital and had to face death, look it clear in the eye, realizing that he might not live beyond this brain surgery. And after surviving, he's refocused his energy on finding stillness and on cultivating a stronger relationship with death. And here we are, right, facing this COVID-19 crisis, and all of us are faced with our own mortality and the mortality of those around us. And so I asked Justin, as I ask all of my guests, what the most important takeaway he wanted listeners to leave this episode with, and he responded that he wants you to reflect on your own mortality. There's a lot of other great discussions in here. Justin and I talk about relationships. We talk about essentialism. We discuss using crisis points as a channel for change in your life. I really enjoy this conversation. I hope that you do too. I think that it's really so timely to be releasing this right now. And once again, thank you all so much for your support. I have started a Patreon account for listeners to contribute to this community. I'll share more in the new closing of this episode. But without further interruption from me, I bring you Justin Rezvani. So Justin, thanks for coming on the Look Up podcast today. Really appreciate it.
Honored. Appreciate you.
I appreciate you, man. So I have so many questions.
Yeah.
I was kind of hoping that we could start with if you could tell us a little bit about how it felt to know that you might possibly only have one day left to live.
So it's been interesting. Today is actually is the 90 days from my stroke and seizure. So there's a little bit of symbolism here and kind of what we're talking through today. 90 days ago was when everything kind of unfolded, and I was in the ICU, and they're telling me I have a brain tumor and my brain's bleeding, and they're trying to control it and stabilize it. And there's this overwhelming feeling of is this it, right? Is this the end of whatever it is? And, this nurse is just hugging me and seeing me cry. And, it's probably the most vulnerable I've ever been. And what I was able to unpack in that moment was I have truly lived a full life in so many ways, and fully faced the fact that if it was my last day, when I was going through that experience, that I would live in peace, that I would die in peace, and I would die truly happy. And what's been interesting is that every moment since that day, right? This is day 90 since that initial experience. I've been fully immersed in mastering what does death mean to me, and what does my relationship the moment I die look like? Because in a lot of ways, to me, the most important moment in our lives is the day we die. It's the day is the culmination of everything that we've experienced. And that moment in which we transition into the next world, or whatever you want to believe in, is in fact the most momentous and important moment of your life. So in a lot of ways, that's really been my mission in the last 90 days, is understand what that means. And in living, I'm actually preparing to die. That's exactly what I'm doing right now.
It's beautiful. I'm reminded of kind of the ancient yogis, the yoga practitioners who believe that we are born with a certain number of heartbeats, and that through controlling our breath, we're able to control the rate of our heartbeat, and thus, in some ways, the moment of death, assuming that there's no, outside occurrence that happens. And, Gandhi talked about what you think about the moment you die plays an important role, if you believe in reincarnation, into how you're reincarnated.
Absolutely.
Or whether or not you're reincarnated.
Absolutely. There's a lot of Ram Dass around that same topic.
Yeah, and speaking of death, and Ram Dass, we lost a great spiritual teacher on this plane very recently, with Ram Dass as well. So it's interesting. I feel like we're all playing these games, these games that maybe we're taught from a young age, whether it be the money game or the success and fame game, or the fitness game, or whatever it is. But in the end, there's one game that we can't avoid playing, and it's literally the game of life and death. So you said over the last 90 days, you've been exploring kind of what death means to you. Would you share a little bit more about what it means to you now?
Yeah, I think, to me, the day you die is when your soul has completed its work on earth. It's fully completed all the things that it needs to do. And it's perfectly the right time in which it's supposed to happen. And there's, to me, many awakening moments along that path. I've been blessed that I've essentially been able to live 3 very separate lives in the last 31 years, right? I had a very interesting business career.
Yeah.
Then I had 18 months of training as if I was a professional athlete. I'm not a professional athlete, but I was training like if I was one. That's all I did for about a year. And then now I've been mastering stillness. And I think this culmination of all these things is that death, to me, is a mastery of how you can be still with yourself, and how you can really solve for what is enough in your life. I think one of the things that you talk about, and I see a lot of people continuously chasing, is like they're chasing more because they don't understand what the cap of enough is in their life. I think that delta of what is enough really is what we're all trying to solve for. It's like, what makes you feel enough? How big is your business to make you feel enough? How much is your fitness tied to being enough? All these things that you're striving, like, what is in fact enough? And when you get down to the synthesis of everything that we're working towards, enough is not as much as people think. I've been very blessed in my life that I've done well in the companies and business and all that. But I think that's transcended me to this next situation that I'm in now is that I think I've found what enough is for me. I'm not interested in, going and trying to do this another huge tech company all over again and just being one of those repeatable entrepreneurs and building.
Yeah.
Because that's not really the path I want to continue on. That's not what I've found in my soul is what that I really want. Could I do it? Absolutely. Do I have the credentials to do it? Absolutely. Do I have the experience to do it? Absolutely. I have all the cards to do it all over again. Yeah. But I found what enough is, and now this is where I'm transcending to this other spiritual path that I want to grow on.
So what is enough for you? And when you say enough, are you speaking in terms of financial abundance? Are you speaking in terms of...
It's everything, right? Everything. Like when I was building my company, I was consistently fighting this, I am not enough as a human being.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of us are fighting that story.
Absolutely.
That's the story that makes us, I got to have more money, or I got to have this business has
I'll
to
be happy when.
I'll be happy when.
Yeah,
because this is not enough, right? And, I think I've just gotten to a point where I understand what enough is, and now cultivating the finer points within that and perfecting these little things is kind of what I'm going for. And it all comes down to, like, if you look at the synthesis of what makes things great, it's finding out what is essential and having relentless focus within that topic. I think one thing I've been very blessed with is that I have a very clear outcome-oriented relationship with things. And I have relentless focus in very specific areas. And I spend all of my time when I'm doing something, I dive into that topic as much as I can to become an expert within that window. When I was running my company, I became an expert in that topic, and my life revolves around that. When I was training as an athlete, Ironman was my life, and understanding fitness within all the specific things around fitness, recovery, and nutrition was my life. And now transitioning and figuring how to die, I mean, essentially from my seizure up until my surgery, those 6 weeks was me figuring out if I was going to die within my surgery, when they open up your brain and they're cutting capillaries, you could lose a lot of blood. Like, they have to put a main line in your neck in case you're losing a lot of blood. And things can happen when your brain gets open. They don't know what's going on. They're like, this is your right temporal lobe. Not a lot of things happen in that area. Now we're seeing that actually the right temporal lobe is where consciousness lies. Where they removed my cavernoma is where consciousness is where they think it is. So there's a lot of things that can happen as a result of that. And so that's what I was preparing for 6 weeks. And a lot of things get unpacked in that. And I think what you'll see over the next few months for me is now building a system for myself around how I recap that. And I'm working on a personal diary around the last basically 12 years of my life.
So much. Thanks for sharing all.
I hope I'm guiding. We're going the right way.
No, totally. I mean, there's no right way. It's just like we're just flowing. I think just stepping back to the question of what is enough. I think you nailed it in the middle of what you were saying. It's not so much a question of what is enough that I think we're all asking. I think we're all asking, and I certainly fall victim to this all the time, is, am I enough? Am I enough? And then that fundamentally leads to this other question of, who am I?
Right.
Who is the I that is enough? Because am I my track record of accomplishments? Am I the friends that I've accumulated over time? Am I this body? Am I my thoughts? Right. And I feel that I'm so much more than that. I feel that we are all so much more than that. And that, as you said, if everyone dies at this perfect moment, the moment that they've kind of finished their duty on this earth, or finished their path on this earth, perhaps everyone is perfectly themselves, as they should be. Like, maybe I haven't had a certain level of, financial success, but that's okay. I still am the best version of myself. But it's interesting because you also are someone that, clearly thrives towards self-improvement, towards self-actualization. So there is simultaneously this cultivating stillness, but there's also a goal-oriented mentality that I'm hearing from you, both in in business and this relentless focus that you have and have had on building a company and then on your fitness and now on stillness. I guess guiding towards a question here, how do you balance between stillness, which in and of itself is the removal of goal, and then cultivating these goals, right? Of understanding death, understanding yourself. How do you balance goal-oriented mentality with stillness?
I think you can have both, because I think stillness within yourself and finding enough is just changing the trajectory of where is this all coming from and what is this all for? If your path towards peace is a result of you having to do some things, but the end goal is this eventual outcome of stillness, then I think it's the right path. My previous, whatever you want to call endeavors, had a very different expected outcome. Like I built a company to make money. So then I could be free. And like this path that I'm on now is a very different kind of stepping stone path to get to a place where actually I don't know what the end of a stillness path looks like.
I want to continue on that thread, because that is actually what you just said is something that has been a goal in my life for a while. It had been a goal in my life for a while. I want to build something to make money, and the purpose of money is freedom. Can you talk to me as someone that has achieved that level of financial success? When you got to the other side of that money, did it create the freedom that you desired?
It took 2 years to 2 years of no, and the last 2 years, yes. Because there's a concept when you, I guess, just in my opinion, where when you have something, for some reason, people are always living above their means consistently. This is like a track record that you can see with a lot of people out there, where the reason things aren't enough is because they always live beyond their means. They always live in something that's a little bit bigger than they can afford. They buy a car that they can't afford. They buy a watch that they shouldn't have. They buy all these toys that they don't necessarily have, because we built a system that's interested in consumerism. So we always buy more than our actual means. 2 years ago, something happened to me where I needed to figure out really what was enough, and not by any means go beyond what my means are, and figure out, okay, this is what I've done in my life. This is the freedom that I'm looking to achieve. This is how much money I need a month to just be that freedom. And these are all the things I need. What does my lifestyle have to look like for that? It was very kind of financially built at first. And I just got to a place where my life is so simple. I don't live the kind of life that I guess a lot of people in my bracket, whatever you want to say, live. They drive super fancy cars. They like to go to nightclubs and fancy restaurants. They wear fancy stuff. They wear fancy clothing. I don't do any of that anymore. I don't have, like, when I first did, when I was, 27 and I sold my company, I thought those are the things I needed. I went and bought a bunch of watches. I drove a Porsche. I had a huge house in Venice. I had all these things. I was like, oh, this is what you're supposed to have when you have money. Yeah. And then I quickly realized that that's just a bunch of consumerism horseshit. It's not the actual truth of what you need. And what I've been
it's so funny, because we hear this all the time, right? Like, the counterbalance to the consumer culture is material things don't buy you happiness. Money can't buy you love. Whatever the kind of trite but true phrase around material well-being not bringing happiness is. And yet so many of us still fall into that trap, and myself included. If I have this, then I will, right? And not a watch necessarily, but if I have this level of financial abundance. So how would you, it's everyone's experience is different, but as someone that experienced that financial success and then went and bought all these things and later realized, okay, actually it is horseshit. People have told me it's horseshit, but it actually is. And I felt that. How can people preemptively stop themselves from falling into that trap? Because I guess extending that question, some people may never actually achieve the financial success of, now I have the wealth and I realize that it's actually bullshit. They might be better served by realizing it today, that chase is actually bullshit. So is there anything that you would recommend, or any experience that you could highlight that would show, hey, like maybe you haven't achieved the material well-being that you desire, but realize that getting there might not change things anyways?
So if I understand the question is like, if I could give some insight to someone that's chasing, I think that
someone that's in the chase.
That's in the chase. That's deeply in the chase. Look, I also think going through the entire process is part of the learning. So I can say a lot of things in hindsight, right? Everything hindsight's 2020. You could be like, oh, I should have done this, or now I think about this. I think the process of what I went through to get to this place is also part of the experience. So I also think that there is value in someone going through that process. But the big key is that you have to take moments that are very impactful and use them strategically, right? So like moments of crisis, right? So I've had many moments of crisis in my life. And I don't just step back and say, okay, this moment of crisis, I'm just going to let it go. I use that moment of crisis to create forks and roads for my life. I had a seizure. So I created, this is a crisis moment. I'm going to change things about my life. I left my company, and I can't get into details on the exact details of that. But that was a crisis point for me to change a trajectory. I was fired from one of my jobs. That's a crisis point in my trajectory. You know, these are all crisis points that I use, and then I determine where I'm going to go with these roads. People have their own crisis points. Everyone has one. If you can use these crisis points as a channel of change and say, okay, maybe this is a wake up call for me to go in a different direction, then maybe we can optimize what we need to do in our life. I mean, Rahm Emanuel told Obama this and said, when there's a crisis point, take advantage of that crisis point and make a better decision, or take advantage of it. So if you take advantage of your crisis points, I think you can make optimal decisions along the way, but just identifying those crisis points properly.
And just, you know, echoing that back to you, thank you for that share. Is really interesting. It's we humans, many of us, spend so much time avoiding crisis, avoiding pain, in fear of loss, in fear of those moments. And yet I'm hearing you describe that those are in fact the best opportunities to make changes in your life that can alter the entire trajectory of your well-being, of your mental health, of whatever it may be.
Yeah, and I think the thing is that I see a lot is that a lot of people talk about the things that they want, but they don't apply the practices necessary to get to that outcome.
Interesting.
That's a realistic situation, right? Like how did you create this wealth, or how did you sell a company in 900 days? How did you build? And the facts are, I made sacrifices to do these things. I gave up time. I put in hours. I put in the work. It was relentless focus on one outcome. And if you're not willing to do that, you're not going to get the outcome.
What do you say?
Very simple.
What do you say to the people that are willing to do that, but they don't get the outcome anyways?
Do
you believe that that's true?
I don't know. I don't know an actual example of that. I don't know an example of someone that truly has put in the exact type of focus that I had in starting and building and growing my company. I don't know an actual case study besides myself that got a similar outcome, because I see like right now I'm an observer and I watch things. There's a lot of people that are like, oh, I want to grow this company, I want to do this, yet they still go to Coachella. Yet they still live for the weekends. Yet they still party until midnight, and they go out on the weekends and they do all that. These are things that are not, they don't work in the exact same way. The most successful people, if they're in whatever field that they're doing, have a relentless focus to that specific thing. There's something to be said about focus. They're an essentialist in that specific topic and what they want to build and grow. You can't have, if you're trying to get to this level up, you can't really have your cake and eat it too, in my opinion. This is just from my opinion. It's played out in two different ways for me. It's played out in business, it's played out as an athlete. And I have actual metrics to back up these two differences in what I like. So I know this process of relentless focus works. I've applied it in basically being broke and not, and then being fat and doing an Ironman. So I have two extreme examples of it working. So that's kind of just my perspective is I don't believe people are really willing to sacrifice certain things to get to that place that they want.
So yeah, that's interesting. It's something that I kind of in the let's call it like self-help world, right? Of, different podcasters and thought leaders in these communities, there's often there's kind of like these diverging schools of thought, right? There's like the spiritual, treat yourself right, be kind to yourself, no negative self-talk, trust the process, etc. The universe provides, whatever. And then there's this other school of thought, which is like, you are in control of your own destiny. You are, if you want it, you just have to work harder. You can get it, etc. And there's, I tend to, and I hear this later thought process coming from you, and I tend to agree to an extent, but I also, there's a but there for me. And perhaps this is maybe because I haven't been able to get over that chasm, right? Of just like complete belief that I am the designer of my destiny, which is circumstance, timing, luck, right? And there's different definitions of luck. These things do play a role.
100% they play a role. But the question is, do you take advantage for them at the right time? I hate to interrupt you.
No, this is great.
But I think that's the catalyst that people are missing sometimes.
Yeah.
Is that there are so many circumstances that we can dive into of where I could have gone down this way, but I went this way and I got this eventual outcome. I could have gone this way, but I went this way and I got this outcome. There is some sort of mentality that if you continuously will go after and reach for these different things, you're going to step up higher in whatever you're trying to do. The thing I see a lot is I don't think people are grabbing enough of these like little things that are showing them these new ways because they're stuck in their own whatever story. So luck and circumstance, I think, is there in a lot of cases, but people are just not in the right mindset to grab it. I don't think I'm special. And I say this so much. I don't think I'm gifted. I'm made of the same thing you are. I think I'm a normal person. I'm not gifted as an athlete. I'm not gifted. I don't think so. I don't think I have anything special than you do. But I think what I've been able to cultivate is this relentless, continuous of like, I want to grow, I want to grab, I want to change, I want to do this. I want to keep going after these interesting things because I have a different relationship with death than I think most people do. Right? When I was 19, I was in a really bad car accident. My car flipped on the freeway 3 times. From that day, I realized that death and I we talk to each other. We talk to each other on a consistent basis. And because I had cultivated a different relationship with my eventual mortality, with my mortality on this planet, I've been able to cultivate a life that allows me to grab things a little bit more. So I go back to kind of what we first talked about, which is death. I think people need to really understand their relationship with death to have a much better relationship with life.
And how can we improve our relationship with death?
To not be afraid of talking about it. Go visit a cemetery and just sit there. Go to a cemetery. People are terrified of cemeteries. I was terrified of going to cemeteries. I was there 2 days ago and I just walked around. I mean, I went and saw my grandfather's grave, but I walked around. I was like, this is like, this just settles in. I was like meditating for 20 minutes there. Like, you settle in with that energy. Like, these were all people that had lives, right? And now they don't. And that's you eventually. Like, that's going to happen to all of us. So what are you going to do while you're here? What are you going to do while you're here? Are you going to lean into all these other things that everyone's doing? Are you going to create your own path? People do what they want to do. And yeah, I don't.
So a couple things that I'm hearing from you. The first is that focus. So kind of like a one-pointed focus rather than falling prey, let's call it, to distraction, is an extremely powerful tool to achieve whatever goal you want, whether it be fitness based, whether it be work based, or whether even it be stillness. And the other is kind of this like memento mori. Memento mori. This concept of remind yourself regularly that you are going to die,
Right.
because that will encourage you to do the things that you want to do in life today rather than putting them off. And those two, this relentless focus and this constant specter of death that hangs over all of us, but bringing that to your consciousness, these two factors have led you to lead a life that you are extremely proud of, to the extent that if you died tomorrow, or if you had died 90 days ago, you felt that you had lived this full life.
Yeah, and I look at the two things as actually I look at two Stoic words. I look at amor fati,
Okay.
and I look at memento mori. I'm
Okay.
getting both tattooed on my arm in 2 weeks, actually.
Yes,
But
and you're a big fan of the Stoics.
I am a big fan of the Stoics. I mean, like all of them. I mean, Seneca, Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius. Like, I mean, I walk around with their books. Like like I literally, they're in my hand or in my car, and it's constantly reading them. But
Beautiful
I look at and amor fati is a catalyst of like every moment that happens to you is supposed to happen to you. It's the love of fate. It's the love of fate that happens in your life. And memento mori is, we're gonna die. Like it's like your constant nature of like this is going to eventually happen to you. I think if you play life in those two ways and understand that everything's made like my friend Peter Crone says this. He's like, we have the audacity to think that we know how the universe should work sometimes. We have the audacity that that's how it works, yet we should lean into the actual experience.
And this is stepping back. So that hubris that we have is basically taking an experience that is objective. It just is. It happened. And then taking our neocortex, the human capacity to judge, and saying that was good or that was bad, positive or negative, applying some kind of subjective frame or story around something that just is. And this is the concept of amor fati, I don't know if I pronounced it right, is basically saying just love what happens to you. Acceptance is the word that comes to mind for me. Acceptance. And so it's fascinating though, because you are, from what I can tell, a massive doer, right? You execute. You want something, you go out and get it. You're fat, you want to go do a triathlon, you go and do it in however many, months, 18 months or whatever it was. And you're like a top fit athlete in that amount of time. And yet, amor fati is not about doing, it's about accepting and being. So again, I'm sensing these paradoxes.
I would disagree though with you that they're paradoxes.
Okay, well, real quick. So, okay, tell me why.
Because along the way, just because you're goal oriented doesn't mean like you can have the love of fate, right? So in the first 3 months of me training for my Ironman, my left knee was like shot. So I couldn't run for a month. So I look at that, I'm like, oh shit, I'm not gonna be able to do my Ironman in six months. What am I gonna do? Then I have to rest and do that. Like I look at these things that happen along the way. It does not need to change the trajectory. It's just accepting the situation and finding the outcome to get over it to still get to your eventual goal. I think amor fati does not apply to you not being goal oriented. It's just accepting the critical paths along the way.
So it's just there's an end point, which is this goal that you're trying to reach, and there's quote unquote obstacles, but they're not truly obstacles. They're just realities that then you maneuver around or you accept, move through, or maybe they change the course. I don't know.
And Ryan Holiday wrote a book on this. The obstacle is the way.
Yeah, exactly.
so in
Going
fact,
back to Stoicism, I read the Daily
Stoic.
every single day.
Yeah.
I
So
love Ryan
at the
Holiday.
end of the day, the obstacles, in fact, are the way, because the obstacles are what make you. I look at moments that I've had in business at hour 11 in the middle of an Ironman, after an 18-mile run, after a hard training day, after, flying around the world, talking to clients and getting a bunch of no's, these experiences are what still help me today to get up because they're built in. You're like, oh, you've experienced some shit. Like you've gone through that. So it's a culmination of all these things that allow you to get to this eventual, whatever place we are. But I think it's important really to cultivate a practice of stillness as much as you can. Like I also compare a lot of things. Like I don't live by any regrets, but I think if I applied some of these practices of stoicism earlier in my life, like when I was 24, I started my company when I was 24 years old. I was a child. I never really had a job. Like I didn't know what I was doing. And not to make any excuses of me not knowing what I was doing. I just reality, I didn't know what I was doing.
It's just true.
It's just the truth. If I would have applied some of these practices, I truly believe I could have been even more successful than I was. I believe that in my heart. I believe that if I would have taken some of these practices, and I could have been a little bit more, because I don't think it takes away your drive. I think it just allows you to just steer the car a little bit better. If the analogy plays right.
Yeah. Stillness. Stillness is an interesting concept because, again, sometimes I think that the most worthwhile questions in life result in a paradox, meaning that they're two seemingly contradictory answers, but we as individuals and humans, I think what's so special about humans is we have the capacity to hold two seemingly conflicting ideas simultaneously. And so what I'm seeing in you, or what I'm reflecting back to you, is a man of action who's cultivating stillness. Do you see the paradox there? Somewhat, right? Like there's this concept in Taoism called Wu Wei, which means non-action. And it doesn't literally mean to sit in a cave and do nothing. It's so hard to explain, but it's this concept of stillness within action, and realizing that even not acting, even choosing not to pursue a goal, is in and of itself acting.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's so cool to meet you and to connect with you, and to hear you talk about the goal of stillness. Right? Because it seems like stillness has no goals, right? Like meditation has no goals. And yet we practice to generate more stillness.
Right. Yeah, and one of the things I would bring some interesting paradoxes is like the output is always growth, right? Like in all the things that we're talking about, the output is to increase our consciousness or growth or whatever you want to call it. And let me just compare it as an athlete, right? There's a lot of studies now, and I do have to attribute a little bit of my, I think, success as an athlete in progressing so quickly was not a result of my drive of getting up and swimming and biking and running and doing all the things that you have to do to get in there. But it was actually what I did in the recovery phases that actually made me advance so quickly. It wasn't the fact that I was just running like everybody else and doing the same mileage and all. It was actually what I did and didn't do in the recovery phase of building my endurance, my saunas, my ice baths, my Normatex, my massages, the sleep of getting over 8 to 10 hours, eating the perfect food at the exact right time, having the right thing right before I was training and have the right thing right afterwards. The not doing stuff was actually the things that made me grow even faster. So there's this different, it's not like you're just out there and running. So I think that the comparisons are just as important in business. I think where I failed when I was younger and was I didn't do enough of the not doing when I was running my company. I was doing a lot of the doing, but not enough of not doing. And now I'm going to the complete opposite of not doing the not doing.
Yeah. I feel that I struggle as a young entrepreneur. I've struggled with hyperactivity, like chasing leads too aggressively, not allowing them to simmer, not creating that space. So I totally hear that, especially as a young man trying to build a company. It's there's a propensity towards action, even when action can be harmful, right? It's like the concept of like cancer. It's like hyperactivity of cell growth, right? It's just too much. So I feel that. I want to step back because, you keep talking about becoming an athlete, but the listeners, let's just assume that they haven't heard your story before. Like, so you sell your business. And we can talk about your company as well later, but like you sell your company.
Sell the company in April 2016.
Okay. How old are you?
27.
27. Okay.
I leave the company January 2019.
Okay.
No, 2018. Sorry. 2018.
So a year later.
A year and a half later. Yeah. Golden handcuffs are gone.
Okay.
A year and a half later. I'm 240 pounds. So
240 pounds.
I'm a little overweight. I just posted a photo on Instagram. About
I would love to share a link to that photo.
And I was like, okay, so I don't have a company anymore. I don't have any emails. No one cares about me.
Yeah.
What do I do?
I
like look at myself. I'm like, holy shit. I should probably focus on my health. Like I should probably, because I'm pretty unhappy at this point. Like I'm eating garbage. I'm not like, I'd done one triathlon, but I did it in like 4 hours or something like that. It was just terrible. I was like, I could barely run. I could barely bike, but I knew how to swim. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to do an Ironman. That's what I'm going to do. And so I'm like,
Kent's just like, I'm not just going to go to the gym and get fit. I'm going to do a freaking Ironman.
So, and I found this list of the 30, and this was, I was 29 at this time, by the time I left. So I was like, and I found this list of the 30 things I wanted to do before I turned 30. And the one thing I didn't do was do an Ironman. I did everything else on the list. So I was like,
what else? What else was on the list?
I have a post on this as well, but, start a company, sell a company, buy a house, have this much money in my bank account. I don't know, all this stuff. Fall in love, fall out of love.
We're going to talk about love later.
Yeah, be in a fraternity, live in a fraternity house. All these things I did in my 20s, basically. But anyway, so I found this Ironman that I can do like 13 days before I turned 30. So I did. It was a half Ironman. It was in Hawaii. It wasn't like the longest race you can do. But then I got like kind of addicted. I was like, this is cool. I want to do this. So let me prepare for a real one. And a full one is not like double the prepare. It's like 4 times the amount of preparation. So then like in October, I kind of got my shit together. Then I got a coach. And then for the next like but basically like 10 months, I trained like for real, like 25 to 35 hours a week training. On the bike, in the pool, running, recovery, like it's your real thing. It's your job. That was my job. And then I did an Ironman in August of last year. So I got to that. But then I got to 172 pounds.
And so you go from 270.
Yeah, no, 240.
240 to 172. And you had done like a triathlon in 4 hours. What did you finish this Ironman in?
Well, the full Ironman I did in 12 hours and 19 minutes.
Okay.
But the biggest thing to look at differences with like the Malibu Triathlon. I came in like 160th the first year I did it, and I came in 4th last year.
Wow.
So like that's like progress, right?
Huge
like
progress.
Yeah, huge progress. Like I did a 2:20 Olympic time. Like it's a pretty good time, right? If you think about the whole thing. So like that's progress to me. It's like making a big kind of leap and jump, and then 2 months later, I have a stroke and seizure. But
yes,
anyway, we'll get to that later.
I was going to say, well, I mean, how did you feel after completing this triathlon?
Well, there's a whole. Ironman. I mean, it was amazing. It was the hardest physical thing I'd ever done.
Yeah.
It's a mental battle. It's not necessarily physical. Your body can do it, but it's continuously having gratitude and being in the moment. Like hyper presence is not about you being still and doing this. Like meditation and being meditative are two very different things. Like an Ironman teaches you how to be meditative because you're swimming for 2.5 miles. You're on a bike for 112 miles and then you run a marathon.
Yeah. And
you're 7 hours into this race and then you got to run a marathon.
It's mentally exhausting.
Like just to think about that. So you have to think about, you don't have to think
I think about doing
left.
One of those 3 things and I'm basically like, I
and
just
now
don't
one
think
of
I
these things don't matter. Like once you do that, then you're like, okay, like after you do an Ironman, you're like, oh, what, should I do a double Ironman? Like, should I do one?
Well, here is it a trap? Is it a trap? Is that a trap? Do people
It's
get
not.
swept away in the
I think it can
in
be
the vainglory of it all?
I think it can be, and you can see that where people's identities get tied to these things, like like it becomes a religion, and that's when I think it gets a little dangerous, where it's like your life revolves around being this thing. This is your identity. I think for
I
me,
am an Iron Man.
I am an Iron
not
Man.
I.
Did
I've
an
done
Iron Man, like
Iron Man.
you know what I mean? And I think that I'm guilty of this. I had that in my profile. I still have Iron Man in my profile, but that's because I'm proud of that moment that I was able to complete it because of where I came from.
Yeah.
Not necessarily just because I did one, because where I was able to come from. Because I think a lot of people, they have this perception, I think, sometimes if someone's never known me for the last 10 years, like, oh, it's easy for you to do an Ironman. You're like, you sold a company, and you're like, oh, it's easy for you to say that because you're like, no, like, it's not easy. Like, I was broke with nothing. I built a business, and then I got this outcome. I was fat, and I did this. I was like, I've made these leaps in these different ways. So that's why I consider myself a normal, like it's normal. It's all good. Like everyone can do what I'm doing. And applying that's just that strategy. It's that perspective. It's that goal-oriented mentality, but finding stillness along the way.
But finding stillness along the way. You had to throw that in there.
Because that's what I'm doing now. I'm reflecting on all these things. I'm taking a chance to take a step back and own the mistakes, own the things that I could have done a little bit better or handled a little bit better, or relationships. But I think what I'm eventually coming to is that I'm focused on very essential things. Like, there's a book called Essentialism, highly recommended, Greg McKeown. I ask myself everything that I do, like, what's the purpose behind it? What's the reason? Is this contributing to my growth? Is this contributing to, where I want to go? Is this essential? And it's interesting that for a lot of people, they say yes to shit that's not essential, and it fucks them up. I think there is a finite amount of energy you have during the day. There's a finite things you can do throughout the day. And learning how to say no is one of the best skills you can have. I didn't know how to say no for a long time. I'd say yes to everything. And it fucked me.
What advice would you give to someone that has a hard time saying no to things?
You need to learn to cultivate, to ask yourself these questions. Is this essential? Is this getting me to my eventual path of where do I want to go? Is this covering up something I don't want to see? Is it part of my path? And when you get down to all the things, I notice myself with my parents even saying this now. I'm like, you know what? That doesn't feel essential to what we have to discuss. Like, this doesn't feel essential.
You say that to your parents?
Oh, I do. I was like, no, I don't think this is an essential conversation.
I'm sure they love that.
No, I mean, it's not they do or they don't. It's just that it's opening them up about like, oh, you know what, maybe we shouldn't, need to talk about that. Is that like, so I ask myself a lot those questions every day. And
especially when you realize you have limited time. Again, this goes back to this memento mori, like, I'm going to die. So why am I wasting my time on small things or people that I'm not interested in spending time with, or whatever isn't serving my highest purpose? But how did you, and what advice would you give to those? Like, is this essential to what? Right? Like, I think other people, have a hard time with identifying what is essential. So again, it's like, is this essential, but is this essential to what? Because I think many of us are kind of just like moving through life confused. Right?
Yeah. And I think a lot of it is because we don't spend enough time by ourselves alone in a quiet room, not on our fucking phones, on Instagram. We're terrified of that. We're terrified of being alone by ourselves in a room. Like, it's just something that scares us. I love it. I love being by myself. I love taking myself out to dinner. I love cooking myself food. I love treating myself to myself and being like, not that I'm a loner by any means. Like, there's like stuff happens at the house all the time, but I like to cultivate being by myself. So I think the first step is you need to cultivate an incredible relationship with yourself and like to be alone by yourself. Then everything else can be on top of that. Because then you start realizing, well, like, okay, this week, how much time did I actually spend by myself? I've gone to dinner out with people every night, or I've gone to this thing every night, or I've gone to, and we end up get caught up in this thing. And then like, I don't get enough sleep. And then I'm like this and I'm tired and blah, 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 blah. Because you didn't do the first thing. You fucked up. You didn't take care of yourself first. We have this expectation that we can take care of other people and we don't take care of ourselves. It's crazy. It's madness. Because we've been taught, for some reason, someone told us that we have to like take care of other people before we take care of ourselves. And that's what's fucked up a lot of people. They have this crazy notion of that, but they don't cultivate that internal love first. I think it's all about that initial cultivation of internal love.
Talking about relationship.
Oh man, I'm probably the worst person to talk to about relationships. I'm not.
That's why we got to talk about it.
I don't know. That's the one thing I'm still figuring out. Right. I was engaged for 2.5 years. I'm not. Was. It's the key phrase. And
when was this? How old were you?
This was last year.
Last year. Ended the engagement last year. So
yeah.
Well,
April, May of last year. It just didn't work out. We're in a public forum, so it's a little challenging to talk about.
You said nothing was off limits.
I did say nothing was off limits, so I have to be very careful in how I
but no, that's totally fine. I appreciate that that honesty. I mean, I think this is one of the great challenges of life. This is something that I struggle with personally, and I think that many people struggle with. You cultivate self-love, you cultivate awareness, and then you fall in love. And it's like, what the fuck? Like, I thought I was good by myself. Now I'm spending time by myself after, I'm in a long distance relationship. So we'll come together for 2 weeks, then we'll be apart for 6. It's like, I thought I was good. And then 2 weeks of alone time goes by and I feel myself like grasping attachment, like trying to fill holes with the other. And it's like, I think relationship is such an incredible tool.
It's a mirror.
It's a mirror, exactly. It's powerful medicine in this path towards self-love. And so, yeah, I asked because I find, as someone so accomplished as you are and clearly so focused, it's like, how can we make time for the other in that space?
I think in the honest truth, as I unpack more and more, is that timing is essential for all things. And I think when the time is right for me, it will become my relentless focus. And I will love someone so deeply and then build something with that person.
What would an ideal relationship look like?
For right now, it's just a bunch of playtime.
What would it?
It's a bunch of playtime.
I mean, it's interesting, like because finding that time to fall in love with yourself and to be with yourself and get comfort. I agree. I think many of us are afraid of that. I see so many people entering into relationships where and I dated the same person for 7 years. I bought the ring. I was engaged to be married. I was 25 at the time. We had developed this codependency, this kind of like, you're funny, I'm not funny. So when we come together, like there's like a funny couple, right? Like you're good at math, I'm good at writing, I'm a painter. Like, so that makes a whole. And it's kind of this like 2 parts make a whole type of codependency in a relationship. And I've been through that and saw the challenge of not feeling whole in myself because I was filling these gaps with relationship. And so I think I just see so many people, falling into this pattern of just like the comfort of having someone else there, but not necessarily the appreciation and love that, they deserve for themselves.
Sure.
Yeah. Mm. And so you were training for this Ironman while you were engaged.
The beginning stages, yes. I was like 3 months in, and that's also part of what drifted things apart, was that having a relationship with an athlete is very different. Like, you have to understand, my ex met me when I was this like hyper driven CEO that wanted to build a $1 billion company, that had just sold the company. It was like 1 month after I sold the business. So I was like, this completed. Then I leave and I'm like, oh, I don't want to do anything. I want to focus on my health. Then I want to train as an athlete. Like, those are very extremes. Like, those are big differences that's what I needed to do to cultivate my soul. So that can create instability in a relationship, right? That can create all these other things that make you, and unfortunately, just like that was one of the catalysts that probably just didn't make it work out.
And that makes sense. I mean, we outgrow, right? We change.
We change, for sure. We change, and I did. I know I did. I changed in an extreme way, right? I mean, I was basically an alcoholic at the time, and then I become sober. Like, I haven't had a drink in 15 months.
Fuck yeah.
Like, these are extremes. Like, you're out every weekend partying, and then you're not.
Yeah. And people start to fall away.
They do completely. Like, this is like, it's an interesting play. Like, this is a sober house, right? Like, we do other things, but there's no alcohol here, which I think alcohol is the worst, right? I mean, there's worse, but
it's
pretty bad.
The worst in that it's so accepted.
It's so like, it's like, oh, you're just having, I just don't, to be honest, I don't get it anymore. Like, I just don't.
It's like no one would just be like, oh, I'm just having a line of cocaine, like, just hanging out, like, it's all good. I just need a quick hit.
I don't get it, but that's just me.
Yeah, no, I feel you. And in that experience, I guess, not even specific to this relationship, but I imagine going from high-powered CEO to relentlessly focused on your personal fitness, a lot of people disappeared.
For sure. I don't know if I was a high-powered CEO by any means. I was just like a regular CEO.
A medium-powered CEO.
I don't know. I was just a regular. I don't consider myself special at all. But yeah, it's a opposite, like complete opposite. Because you start caring about things differently. Like you don't go out because you have to be up at 5 a.m. training. You don't drink because it's going to fuck you up. You don't have the same friends because your friends want to party and you want to go out on a run. You lose people, but it's for the great. I mean, even in the last like 3 months, like since my whole thing, I've completely rethought of the people I want around my life. Like, if you're not fully contributing to the path of growth, you're sorry. And that's the thing. People are so afraid. That's the other catalyst that I'm saying. Like, people are so afraid to lose people that shouldn't be in their life because they have the story that they should be there. Like, cut the fucking cord. Move on. Find other people to be friends with that maybe help you grow a little bit better. We're stuck in this like thing like, oh my God, I have to be this way because maybe my friends won't accept me. Do you know how many times I would go out and I wouldn't have a drink and everyone's drinking at the restaurant? They'd be like, why aren't you drinking, Justin? I was like, fuck off.
Yeah.
I'm drinking because I don't want to drink. I have shit to do tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
Like, are you afraid to do that? Are you afraid to be the person that's outside the box? Are you afraid not to fit in? Well, are you built to fit in? Have we all been built to fit in?
Possibly we're programmed, from a young age.
Because we're afraid to leave the tribe.
Yeah, exactly.
But we're not living in those worlds anymore.
No, I hear you. I think you're onto something with this. This is I want to pull on this thread a little bit because I feel like we are so quick to alter our behavior to be accepted by others at the expense of ourselves.
100%.
And that's so it's actually like the definition of insanity.
Completely. Completely.
But I mean, not all of us, because some of us better than others, but myself like included, like I, do this all the time, right? Like I don't want to do that. Well, they want me to do that. So,
I mean, one great example to me is sleep. I think it's a great catalyst of all this stuff where lately I've been really prioritizing my sleep, mostly because I just had brain surgery, but I'm really, prioritizing my sleep above all else. Whereas I eat dinner at 5:30 to 6 and I'm in my bed by 8 o'clock and I'm probably asleep by 8:30. Like
no way.
Weekends,
what
no
time
matter
do you
what.
wake up?
When the sun comes up.
Fuck yeah.
6:30.
That's so beautiful.
Today was 5:30.
Yeah, like
like you're coming in for the podcast. Like I've been up for 5.5 hours. I've gotten so much shit done. Like and we're just like, you're like, here we go. Another thing to do during the day.
I've been trying to get up at 7:30. That's that's
great,
my
man.
goal.
As long as you get your hours. But like I'll say no to so much stuff because I'm like you'll see. Go look at my text. Hey, you want to go do this? Like, no, I need to prioritize my sleep. I literally say that to people. I have to prioritize my sleep because what I'm saying is it's not that I don't want to go out. It's not that I want to go hear a concert or go to a Mardaleva play or whatever. It's just happened this weekend.
I've been listening to them all weekend. Yeah,
everyone was there.
Yeah, the whole crew.
Like, it's not that I don't want to be there. It's just the fact is like, no, I got to prioritize my sleep because I know how much I'll feel like shit if I don't get it.
Yeah.
I know. And I think a lot of us are in that same boat. We're afraid to wake up in the morning and be like, I wasn't in that Instagram photo. Yeah. What the fuck?
Yeah, FOMO.
I wasn't there. Why wasn't I there? I could have had a great time. Like, actually, the thing you probably needed was 2 more hours of sleep. And
then you go there and you're like wishing that you hadn't gone because you're like, shit, now I'm not going to get done what I wanted to get done. And this is such a core fundamental, important, I don't want to call it an issue or a challenge. Maybe it's a challenge of life, is why relationship I think is so important. Because whether it be a romantic relationship or a friendship, it's like this concept of compromise. I don't really know where I fall in the spectrum of, is relationship about compromise? Is compromise a bad thing? Is it a dirty word? Like, I'm compromising my values, I'm compromising my goals, I'm compromising my mission, I'm compromising my focus to appease the other in this relationship.
Fuck that.
Like, how much is intention? But like, if the intention in the compromise is like, I love this person, I want to spend time with this person, okay, it's going to affect my sleep tonight. Like, is that kind of compromise okay? But then what's the cost?
I think the entire issue is more people are trying to fuck themselves than to unfuck themselves. Right? Your goal every day should be to unfuck yourself.
Yeah.
Right? Like, to unpack all the things. Like, I look at, dude, I see it every day where it's like people like, let's just even talk about the drinking thing. Like I'll talk to someone on a Sunday and we're supposed to go on a hike and they're like, oh my God, I'm hungover. I went out last night. I had so much stuff to do. And like, I just fucked myself. And it's like, you've done that for the last 10 weeks. Like, when are you going to decide that you don't want to fuck yourself anymore to the things that you actually want to get done to level up in your life? When are you deciding that you become more important than all the other things that you're going out for? Like, when does the attachment of external mechanisms change for you? When do you decide that? What needs to happen in your life for that change? It's like a question I ask my friends legitimately, because the goal should not be to continuously digging yourself a larger hole you can't get out. Get the fuck out of the hole and move on. Unfuck yourself.
Respect. I mean, absolutely. I'm someone that on the last episode that I recorded, I was chatting with Andrew Horn and I was talking to him about men's work and self-growth and like, what happens when you're a crew? You said you were in a fraternity. It's like, what happens when, you're hanging out with the frat brothers and it's just like talking about that, that hot chick and that crazy party night. And you're just like, I don't want to talk about this shit anymore. Like, I'm like, it's fun every now and again, but I'm over it. Right. And yet continuing to put yourself back in that situation for what reason? Well, because they're your friends. Right. So it's like that instinct that just fuck it, cut it. is so much harder.
Right. Because we still have these primate wirings that this is our tribe. If we get kicked out of the tribe, we won't have food tomorrow. There's still that wiring. But that's not the reality of the world we live in now. We have to transcend our primate wiring that if we lose this tribe, we will have food and our life will go on. We were built for so long. We have to remember all this shit is new. It's the paradigm we live in now, but we have these, traits that are built into our genome that say, if we get kicked out of the tribe, we die. Which is why we continuously stay in the tribe. But we're not living in sub-Saharan Africa anymore, hunting lions and shit.
Yeah.
We're in fucking Venice Beach and trying, like
Pretty nice view.
We're in the Palisades now. Right? We're in Venice Beach and we are just around our friends and we can continue to grow from there. So I think it's just one of those things that we have to realize the paradigm that we're in and transcend and growth that paradigm. My entire life has been this concept of trying to unfuck the things I fucked in myself. And there's probably books around titles about this. Go and fuck yourself or something like that. I'm sure there's somebody that wrote a book.
We'll find it.
We'll find it and link to it in the show notes. But it's just, that's the reality.
Yeah, and there's we've been going for a while now, and there's so much more that I want to ask you. So I'm gonna try to.
We can do a part 2.
Yeah, I'd love to do a part 2. I'd love to do a part 2. I was curious. I'm curious about to go back to where we started, and maybe that can bring us full circle in this episode. I'm curious about 90 days ago. I'm curious about, this surgery that you went through, this experience, and how much of this philosophy that you're speaking right now was there even 90 days before that experience. Because you had already done the triathlon, you had already done the business, you obviously had this laser focused mentality of I'm unfucking myself. But what accelerated and or changed for you 90 days ago?
I'll preface with, I think me finding out I had a cavernoma, which is a fancy word to say a brain tumor, which is a bunch of blood vessels that blew up in my brain that caused a hemorrhage, just to give context.
Yeah.
Was the best thing that ever happened to me. Reason is because it allowed me to cultivate the most important thing that I need to learn right now in my life, which is this concept of really being still. And what changed was that my perspective on my reality completely flipped. Because the day before I was I'm good. If you look at probably most of our friend groups, I was probably one of the healthier people in this group, right?
Yeah.
People are just holy shit, how'd that happen to you? You're the guy that runs every day and perfect all this.
Yeah.
How does that thing happen to you? And so it's this awakening of the one thing I could get is a brain tumor, right? Everything else probably wouldn't. So it woke me up to the fact.
It shows you what's outside of your control.
100%, which is pretty much most things. So it's it became this thing that I have to cultivate this thing inside of me that isn't an external, I have to run every day, or I have to it's an internal stillness. It's an internal quiet. It's an internal ability to just be still. And in a moment, just stop everything. And just be with that. And I think that's for me, that's a really powerful mechanism. And that's really what changes. This concept is just this, where we just kind of experience probably for anyone listening, they don't know what just happened, but something just happened.
Justin, thanks for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Honored, brother. Thank you for reaching out.
Openness.
Happy to help.
And your story, it's so beautiful, so much to learn. Just really, really grateful for you coming on.
Thank you, brother.
Likewise. Appreciate it. All right. Hello, Look Up listeners. One final note before we go. Thank you again for tuning in. Going forward, we'll be releasing new episodes of Look Up every Wednesday morning, Eastern Time. If If you're getting value from this podcast and you want to give back to support our future, please take a moment to contribute to our community on Patreon. Our Patreon contributors have access to some great additional perks, including one-on-one meditations with yours truly. I've shared the link in the show notes below the episode. You can also find the show notes to this and previous episodes on our website, www.thelookuppodcast.com. If you can't contribute at this time, there are other helpful ways to give back. You can share this episode on social media, tag me, and or leave a review on your favorite podcast app. Trust me, every review goes a long way. If you want more content, including more of my personal thoughts, you can follow me on social media. My handle on both Instagram and Twitter is @WarkMeinstein, WarkMeinstein, or you can subscribe to the Lookup Weekly newsletter on my website. I'm also very responsive to email, so feel free to send questions, booking inquiries, speaking requests, and sponsorship opportunities to marc@thelookuppodcast.com. Finally, for those of you that don't know, I lead virtual yoga, breathwork, and meditation classes, as well as one-on-one coaching and teaching sessions, which you can book from the website or my social media accounts. Thank you to Sam Palumbo and Patch Kid Music for the great intro and outro tunes and for the sound engineering. Thank you, brother. And thank you to all of you listeners for continuing to support the show, for tuning in. And I hope that you've been enjoying this journey as much as I have.